Hi everyone, back after a winter of hibernation. So today what we're going to be doing is changing the sump on my E30. We're also going to do an oil change and filter change because we're going to have to drain the oil anyway. It makes sense to do it at the same time. So I've got a nice shiny new sump here. So I've got to take the old one off. The reason for it, you'll see in a moment, is a speed bump had an argument with me and cracked the bottom of the sump, so now it's leaking oil. So from that point, we're going to drop the sump, we're going to drop the oil, we're going to replace the sump with a new sump, new seal, and at the same time we'll do the oil change and filter change. So let's get cracking. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to start the car up, we're going to let it tick over, get nice and warm. By doing that, that'll bring the oil viscosity down to a point where it'll come out of the sump nice and smooth and warm and get all the oil out of the sump. If you do this while it's cold, there's a chance that you're not going to get all the oil out of the engine. So you want that oil nice and warm to start with. Then once we've done that, we're going to undo the oil filter. It's a cartridge filter type. Again, by undoing the cartridge filter at the top, you're allowing air into the system. That's also going to help it drain quicker. Okay, so it's nice and warm. We've switched it off again, and now we can remove the oil filter. So the oil filter is inside this housing. We're going to use a 13mm spanner. Loosen that off nice and tight, that. Once it's loose, pop the top off and take it out. Nice dirty oil there. Put this out the way. Now we can look to drain that oil. So before we do anything, let's run through what we need for today. So I've got a Sealy oil drain, which works great for me. It means that I can collect the oil, store it until I can dispose of it correctly. As we're going to be working with oil, we want to make sure that we're using our disposable gloves. We don't want to get that horrible oil all over our fingers. I've then got 8 litres of 5W30s, fully synthetic, which according to Google is the best thing that I can use. On top of that, we've got tools. So tool wise, I've got my Clark Pro 3/8 drive set. I've also got an extension bar in case I need it, and a 3/8 ratchet. I prefer my ratchets to be extendable. Sometimes you need that extra bit of welly. So with the oil now drained, we can take this filter out. Careful not to spill any oil all over my engine. I'm going to put it in there, and it can just slowly drain out into the oil pan. Next, we're going to wipe down the inside of the filter housing, get any excess oil out of there as well. I think I'll just stuff this rag in and let it soak it up, because we've got a little bit yet to do by now dropping the sump. So I can lift the car back up, drop the sump now. Okay, so this is where my rattle gun comes in handy. We have a 10mm socket. I've got a short 10mm socket, and I've also got a long bit 10mm socket. Basically I can undo those quick sticks. and drop down the sump. So the sump is now off, and we can still see remnants of our old gasket. So we're going to use a scraper with a blade in it to scrape off any remnants of that gasket. I'll then get some wet and dry sandpaper and make sure that I take this edge back to nice shiny aluminium before we can then replace the gasket and put the new sump on. Okay, so all of my bolts are now in. In an ideal world, we'd be using a torque wrench, but I don't have one small enough because the bolts on this should be 10 Newton meters. Now, if you're wondering what 10 Newton meters feels like, 10 Newton meters would be the equivalent to you having a 1 meter stick with 1 kilogram of weight on one end and your wrist on the other end. And the amount of force going through your wrist at that point is around 10 Newton meters. Now, if you think of what can I use as 1 kilogram, generally a bag of sugar is 1 kilogram. Get a tape measure, measure a piece of wood or a stick or something like this. Obviously make sure it's lightweight. We don't want to make the stick too heavy, otherwise that'll add meterage and weight to your wrist. So I'm going to go for, I've got an idea of what 10 Newton meters feels like. I'm not in the army, so I'm not going to do it taff tight, but I am going to tighten it to what I would suggest would be my 10 Newton meters. Now there is a danger if we over tighten these that we will damage the threads. Again, it's aluminium, we don't want to damage those threads. Okay, so we're back down to the ground. We can take our rag out of the oil filter housing. Let's make sure we've got all remnants of dirty old oil out of there. And once we're happy with that, we can put the new filter in. So, filter is insert type. So there's my new filter that's going to go in. Now it's non-directional, so you can put it in either way round, but I'm going to put it so that it's got the name on the top. So we'll slot that into there, like so. There's some other bits that we need to put on. So we've got a new seal for the top of the filter housing. So again, I need to clean that up, but we've got this rubber seal that goes around the edge there. We've got a replacement one of those, and also on the bolt itself there is a brass or aluminium washer, so I've got a replacement brass washer for that. So first let's clean it up. So we'll take the bolt out, make sure we give that a wipe down, get any excess oil and dirt off there. We can take that old washer off as we don't need it. And I've just noticed that there is also a rubber seal on the end of there, so I'll check my pack and make sure that I've got a replacement one of those. which it looks like yes I do, which is great. So bolts now clean. Let's take the filter housing top and make sure that that's all nice and clean. Any remnants of old dirty black oil that we leave is going to go straight back into the system, so we want to avoid that. And also, if there's oil on the components where we're trying to make a seal, it's got the potential that it's not going to allow it to seal. So make sure it's nice and clean. Okay, so next I'm going to get a small flathead screwdriver and I'm just going to prise that rubber out so it comes out nicely. We then need to wipe down again because there's a bit of oil inside that ring. Just going to wipe that round. Make sure we get it all out. Now we can get our new seal. A tip that I would always work by is we get some fresh oil and we just coat that seal in a little tiny bit of fresh oil, and that should help it seal. Now I'm not saying that that is the trade method. I have no idea, that's just something that my dad taught me. So I'll open my oil. Just dip my finger in and just run my finger around the seal. So I've got some oil on my finger and just run it around the seal. Nice fresh oil. Not too much, we're not trying to lather it in oil. Just enough to assist in the seal. I suppose the scenario is when you put your sat nav on your windscreen, it stays a lot longer if you give it a little lick first. So we've done that, we can now replace the seals. So we've got the brass washer and the rubber seal on the bolt. So it'll be the same scenario with the rubber seal. The brass washer, we're just going to throw that on. And that'll be the same again for the rubber seal. Little screwdriver. Just going to flick that washer off. If it is stuck, you can't get it off, feel free to cut it off, as long as you don't damage your new one, because it's the new one that we need to put on. So same as before, still got a bit of oil on my fingers, so just a little coating of oil. Make sure that the end of that bolt, we get the oil out of there, and we can put our new seal on. So you can use your imagination for what that is like. So now that we've got our new seal on, we've got our new washer on, we've replaced the washer in the oil filter housing lid. I'm going to go ahead and put that back on. Now you'll notice two tabs. There's a tab on either side of this filter housing top. On the filter housing bottom, there's also two tabs, so we need to line those two tabs up. So I'll line those two tabs up. Make sure that the filter's sitting right. You'll tell if it's not because it won't press down. Drop our bolt back in. feel the thread again. Always do it finger tight initially because we don't want to damage the thread. Again, this is aluminium. Aluminium doesn't like excessive force. We can tighten that up now. Okay, that's all tight now, all connected. We've put our sump back together. I did double check that the sump plug was nice and tight, and that's got a brand new aluminium washer on it. So all that's left to do now is fill it back up with oil. Okay, so we're going to fill it up with oil now. There's two things I'm going to be doing. One is filling oil into the filler cap, your filler cap, which is on this side of the engine. And I'm going to be using a funnel because I have one. Now, if you don't have a funnel, you could cut out a bottle or something like that, you know, like a 2 litre non-branded bottle. Cut that open and use that as a funnel. It's something that's always worked for me. The second thing that I'm going to be doing is checking the dipstick. Now, according to BMW, this engine should take just over 4 litres. So I have 8 litres because it's always good to have spare oil, but also I'm going to put 4 litres in initially. Once I've got those 4 litres in, I'm going to check my dipstick and see how much more oil I need to add. So as I said before, I've filled it up with oil, done my 4 litres. I've then got the dipstick out. Now the dipstick itself has 2 markings on it, 2 dots. Now, maximum and minimum between those dots. So our aim is to take it up to maximum, but we need to give the oil a couple of minutes to settle within the engine. It's going to take time to run its course through the engine down into the sump. Once it gets there, we can put the dipstick in. We're going to bring it back out, and then we're just going to make sure that we're just up to that second dot, which my 4 litres has taken it perfectly to where I need it to be. As I said, don't immediately check the dipstick and assume that it's not got enough oil in it. Always wait a few minutes, then check the dipstick, wait a few minutes more, check the dipstick again, because the oil level might go up a little bit slowly than expected. But checking that now, that's perfect. That's exactly where I want to be, and that was just 4 litres of oil. Obviously I've got another 4 litres that I'll keep hold of. Whether I use it on this vehicle or use it on another car, doesn't matter. It's always nice to have spare oil knocking about. So now that everything's finished, one thing I would always suggest doing is having a quick look underneath the car to make sure that there are no drips or leaks of oil before you start the engine, because the danger could be you've just done all this work, changed the oil, you start the car up and you end up blowing up your engine because you've run it dry of oil because the oil's all over the floor. So I'm going to start the car up now. Everything's back together. I've checked there's no oil leaks on the floor, but at the same time you will hear as I start the car it's quite tappety. That's because the oil's all down in the sump now, and we need to draw it up through the engine as the engine's running, so that tapping sound will calm down. So let's give it a go. Okay, let's start the engine. Now that's it for today. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next episode.